Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. Don't adjust your calendar. Yes, it is Monday. I have to do the show a day early because I'm on the road for an early screening of Sinners, and I want to make sure I get a review of that to you as soon as I can. So we are using the dreaded estimates for today's show, but not to worry if there are any major corrections. We will look at those next week. And it was a busy weekend at the box office. A Minecraft movie had a strong second weekend, and we had a whole slew of new contenders that also opened. So let's jump right into the box office top 10 for this past weekend. And at number one was a Minecraft movie. Its second weekend estimate is $80.6 million. That's a drop of about 50% from its great opening weekend. That's not one of the top five numbers as far as the second weekend hold for a movie that opened over $150 million, but it is close to that. So a good second week for a Minecraft movie. It was not front-loaded as many people thought that it might be. It's currently at about $280.9 million domestically. In second place was the animated film The King of Kings, which is the latest from Angel Studios. Its estimate right now is at about $19 million. I wouldn't be surprised if that number goes up a little bit when the final numbers come in today, just because the box office on Sunday might be a bit higher than the estimates, but still a good showing for Angel Studios. It wasn't quite at the level of the first weekend for Sound of Freedom, which also opened earlier in the week, but it was pretty close. And it just goes to show that when they have the right movie and the right marketing, they can really turn people out to theaters. In third place was The Amateur with $15 million. It stars Rami Malek, and I was actually surprised at how well it did relatively. It obviously targeted the right audience. They showed up, and a pretty strong contender there in third place. In fourth place was Warfare from Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, which brought in $8.3 million. The budget on this movie wasn't very high, reportedly around $20 million plus advertising. I thought that it might perform a little stronger, honestly, but I think it also might have been competing with The Amateur for perhaps the same audience, and it has been tougher to get people out to see movies that aren't based on franchises or pre-existing stories. So we'll see how Warfare does over the next several weeks. In fifth place was Drop from Blumhouse, which brought in $7.5 million. It actually got fairly positive reviews, and so I would have expected an opening maybe a bit higher than that, but we'll see if word of mouth is able to take over on Drop in the next couple weeks. Coming in sixth place was The Chosen: Last Supper Part 3. It's the third consecutive week where The Chosen has released a new batch of episodes from their latest season in theaters. It comes in at $5.8 million. A Working Man drops down to number 7. It dropped 58% and brought in just over $3 million. Snow White drops 53% with a $2.8 million weekend. It seems like this might be its last weekend in the top 10. We'll see how everything stacks up with the releases coming up this weekend. $81.9 million, so it is assured to miss $100 million domestically. Just very, very bad news financially for Disney on this movie all around. In ninth place is The Woman in the Yard, which brought in $2.1 million. And 10th place, given the estimated numbers, is actually tough. I saw a few different options with a few different numbers. So right now we're going to give it to The Chosen: Last Supper Part 2 with around $900,000. And when the final numbers come in, I will look at that and update next week if I need to. 5 movies dropped out of the top 10. That's what happens when you get a bunch of new movies. Captain America: Brave New World is out after 8 weeks. Death of a Unicorn falls out of the top 10 after just 2 weeks. The Chosen: Last Supper Part 1 is also out after 2 weeks. The Friend and Hell of a Summer both drop out after just 1 week in the top 10. And when we look at the biggest theater count changes for the past weekend, Death of a Unicorn was slayed as far as theaters lost. 2,219 theaters lost. It's now in only 776. So not a very impressive debut for that film, and it did not get any time in theaters to try to turn that around. The Chosen: Last Supper Part 2, reportedly with a theater loss of 1,641. Not surprising because it is a weekly series. Captain America: Brave New World lost the bulk of its theaters, 1,310 of them. It's now in 440. Snow White also lost a big chunk of theaters, 1,210. It's in 2,540. And The Chosen: Last Supper Part 1 lost over half of its remaining theaters, 918 of them. It's now in 673. Looking at what I call the road to recovery, the red line is the box office weekend average for 2021 to 2024. The blue line is 2015 to 2019. And for the second consecutive week, we were ahead of not just where we have been post-COVID, but where we were pre-COVID. And really, a Minecraft movie, yes, has a big part of credit there, but also the new films that entered the marketplace. The fact that we had 4 other new movies in the top 5, that has kept us ahead of where we have been even historically. And that's good news because the box office really is trying to claw back a lot of what they lost with a very disappointing March. We'll see what happens this upcoming weekend with Sinners and the other movies in the marketplace. Looking at the top 10 domestic opening weekends for 2025 so far, we actually had 2 of them this past weekend. King of Kings had, as of right now, the 5th best opening of the year at just over $19 million. That edges it just above Mickey 17. We'll see what the final numbers say. And The Amateur, as of right now, is at number 9 for the year at $15 million flat. If it makes just a little bit more, then it could be at number 8 ahead of Den of Thieves 2 Pantera. So people actually going to the movies this weekend, not just to see Chicken Jockey. Looking at the highest grossing video game movies of all time domestically, a Minecraft movie is now at number 2. It's moved ahead of all 3 Sonic the Hedgehog films. It's significantly behind the Super Mario Brothers movie, and we're going to look at how those 2 movies compare to each other in just a minute. And when we look at the video game movies all time domestically adjusted for inflation, Minecraft has also moved up to 2nd place on that list. It is ahead of Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and again, just behind the Super Mario Brothers movie. So this is a film that has moved up both of these lists with a quickness. And it's also a movie that's moving up the domestic gross list of Jack Black. These are the 5 highest grossing domestic films for Jack Black. A Minecraft movie is now at number 4. It should pass Jumanji: The Next Level by next weekend, and then we'll see if it gets up above Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. I think that it will. And then, of course, whether it will hit the Super Mario Brothers movie at $574.9 million. It's also moving up the list for Jason Momoa. It's the 3rd highest grossing film in Jason Momoa's career, ahead of Fast X and Justice League. It's about $50 million behind Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. He was barely in that movie, but it was a credited appearance. And it's about $55 million behind Aquaman. I'm pretty confident in saying that before all said and done, a Minecraft movie will be Jason Momoa's highest grossing film domestically. And let's look at Minecraft versus Super Mario Brothers. This is both movies through 2 weekends. Now, this is not day for day because Super Mario Brothers movie opened on a Wednesday, but I wanted to look at how these 2 films are doing through 2 full weekends. So what I basically did was fold in the first 2 days of grosses for Super Mario Brothers movie into what you would call its quote-unquote opening weekend, the first 3 days. And you can see that while a Minecraft movie is doing very impressively, it is still tracking healthily behind Super Mario Brothers through 10 days of release. I'm not seeing that gap close. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but I think what we're looking at if this trend continues is that a Minecraft movie is going to do very well, but it is going to ultimately finish behind the Super Mario Brothers movie domestically. Of course, I will keep tracking this to see if this trend shows any signs of changing. And a Minecraft movie is a success, not just domestically, but also internationally. We're going to look at those numbers in just a little bit, but it's already over $500 million worldwide. And so my member poll question this week is very simple. Do you think that a Minecraft movie is going to make $1 billion worldwide? You have 2 answers there, yes or no. So let me know what you think. Last week, I asked members here on the channel which unadapted game has the most blockbuster potential, and this was a very close list. The winner with 38% of the vote was Red Dead Redemption, but right behind it was Fortnite with 32%. Grand Theft Auto came in 3rd place with 23%. And then in a distant 4th was Call of Duty. I guess, as some people pointed out, Call of Duty would just be a war movie. So I guess I can see why not a whole lot of people voted for that. You have to imagine that Warner Brothers is happy with the performance of a Minecraft movie. Judging by the comments on last week's show, everyone in the world absolutely knew that it was going to be a hit, and it was ridiculous to suggest otherwise. I understand that some people might have had a better understanding of the appeal for Minecraft, better than even myself. But I also think there's a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking going on for a lot of people, saying like, well, of course it's a major hit. How could it not be? Ignoring the fact that there have been a lot of other failed movies that were based on very popular franchises, but it is absolutely a hit. And another studio that I think has to be happy is Angel Studios with their $19 million debut for The King of Kings. As they said, it is the highest opening animated biblical movie of all time, although to be fair, the competition in that category is not very strong. I think The Prince of Egypt was the last movie that held that record. But it was a movie that attracted a lot of audiences and attracted a big ensemble cast to voice the different characters in the film. Oscar Isaac actually voiced Jesus in The King of Kings. And that leads us to our trivia question for this week. This is not the first time that Oscar Isaac has been in a movie about the life of Jesus. What was the other movie and who did he play? I will say this was not exactly a high-profile film, but when I was going through his filmography, I was actually surprised because I'd forgotten that he was in this movie. And the answer is The Nativity Story, which was released back in 2006. It was directed by Catherine Hardwicke, and Oscar Isaac played Joseph, Mary's husband, and the father of Jesus here on earth. So Oscar Isaac has now played Jesus and Jesus' dad. And I mean, listen, if he really wants to stretch as far as what he can do as an actor, I guess he could play God and Mary. And then he's got pretty much all the bases covered. I also mentioned Warfare's opening in the top 5. It was not one of the top 10 debuts of the year, but it was one of A24's top 10 debuts. If you're looking at wide releases, some of these movies are movies that had been in limited release and then moved to wide release. It was number 7 all time, just ahead of The Green Knight and just behind The Witch. The highest debut in A24 history was, of course, also from Alex Garland, last year's Civil War, which has the record pretty handily. It's nearly double the gross of Hereditary. It opened to $25.7 million. It also had a much higher budget than Warfare. And when you look at wide openings for Alex Garland as a writer and or director, this was number 4 all time for him. It was ahead of the debut of Dread back in 2012. He was the writer and, according to some people, the shadow director of that film. But it comes in behind 28 Days Later back in 2003, as well as Annihilation in 2018, and of course Civil War last year at $25.7 million. We'll probably be looking at this chart again later this year when 28 Years Later hits theaters, because Alex Garland was the writer on that film, though he did not direct. Danny Boyle is coming back to direct that movie. Let's turn now from the domestic marketplace to the international marketplace. These are the top 5 films in all of the territories outside of the US and Canada. At number 1 was a Minecraft movie with $79.6 million, so about equal really to what it did here domestically. The Amateur brought in $17.2 million internationally. And third was Good, Bad, Ugly, which is a film from India. It's a Tamil language movie about a former crime boss who returns to the criminal life when his son is arrested. So $9.7 million for Good, Bad, Ugly. Another $5.3 million for A Working Man. And rounding out the top 5 is Snow White at $4.7 million. When you take those numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, you get the top 5 films worldwide for the past weekend. And a Minecraft movie brought in another $160.2 million just over the past weekend worldwide. It was a 48.9% drop, so a bit of a smaller drop worldwide compared to what we saw domestically. The Amateur brought in $32.2 million worldwide. The King of Kings, based largely on its domestic debut, brought in $19.6 million. Good, Bad, Ugly brought in $10.3 million. Its worldwide total is now at $16.7 because it opened earlier in the week. And Drop rounds out the top 10 with $10 million worldwide. Let's take a look now at what I call some of our specialty charts, and we will start with the per theater averages for the past weekend. Now, these will probably be updated when final numbers come in because a lot of movies aren't quite on the radar on Sunday when we get the initial round of numbers. But at number 1 is The Teacher, which was playing in just one theater and brought in $20,000. The Teacher is about a teacher in Palestine who finds himself at the center of a hostage trade-off while mentoring a young student. And then the rest of the top 4 right now, these are all wide releases. A Minecraft movie bringing in $18,792 per theater. I hope that some of that money goes to hazard pay for the theater crews that have to pick up after the rowdier screenings of a Minecraft movie that you see on social media. The King of Kings is there at number 3 at $5,953 per theater, followed by The Amateur at $4,411 per theater, and Warfare at $3,109 per theater. And looking at the top 5 films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, as of right now, Good, Bad, Ugly leads this list. It played in 599 theaters and brought in a total of $591,000. The Ballad of Wallace Island moves up to second place. I believe it's doing a further expansion this upcoming weekend. It made $400,000 in those 253 theaters. Sacramento, playing in 241 theaters, brought in $314,000. A Nice Indian Boy expanded to 70 theaters and brought in $155,100. And Secret Mall Apartment expanded to 46 theaters and brought in a total of $72,860. When we look at the 2025 annual domestic box office so far, the biggest change is that a Minecraft movie is now the highest grossing film of the year at $280.9 million. That puts it above Captain America Brave New World, which is still trying to hit that $200 million mark domestically. Dogman, Snow White, and One of Them Days round out the top 5. And then entering the list at number 10 is A Working Man at $33.5 million. Heart Eyes drops out of the domestic top 10. Looking at the top 10 for 2025 so far worldwide, a Minecraft movie also moving up that list. It's now at number 2 at $550.5 million, so hitting that $500 million mark. Of course, Naja 2 is still at number 1 at $2.1 billion. Detective Chinatown 1900 and Captain America Brave New World both moved down to numbers 3 and 4. Snow White actually enters the top 5 at $181.6 million, even though that is a symbolic top 5 at best. Creation of the Gods 2 moves down to number 6, and then the rest of the top 10 remains the same with Dogman, Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy, Mickey 17, and Boonie Bears' Future Reborn. We've got so much more to break down on the show this week, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this video. This video is brought to you by Chubbies. It's April, and the last thing you want is to look like the fool who's still dressing for winter. You want an outfit that says, "Come and get me, summer," and Chubbies has every possible option that you can think of. I've been outside a lot lately enjoying the great weather and wearing my pair of original stretch shorts. They're lightweight, they feel great on those warmer days, and they're perfect for playing soccer in the afternoon and hitting up the local brewery afterwards. I'm much better at one of those two things. I'm also a fan of their Friday shirt, which is my go-to for a casual afternoon. And honestly, you deserve a wardrobe upgrade for springtime. And for a limited time, Chubbies is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my exclusive code DAN20 at chubbiesshorts.com. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention Chubbies' classic line swim collection. They're both great looking and feature 4-way stretch fabric that dries quick, so you don't have to walk around the pool or the beach with the dreaded drippy shorts. Whether you're getting dressed for your workday, a workout, or a weekend getaway, Chubbies has you covered. For a limited time, Chubbies is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my code DAN20 at chubbiesshorts.com. That's code DAN20 at chubbiesshorts.com. Support the show and tell them that I sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. So that's what I have for you as far as the box office. Let's take a look now at the world of streaming, and we will start with the latest numbers from Netflix. This covers the week of March 31st to April 6th. There will be new numbers that are released tomorrow. And at number 1 was The Lifeless, the Netflix original film that had a good debut the previous week. It's number 1 with 29.19 million views. That bumps Adolescence down to number 2 at 17.85 million views. That's still a very strong performance for Adolescence. At number 3 is Gone Girls, the Long Island serial killer, which brought in just over 13 million views. This is a docuseries about a string of unsolved murders and the investigation to connect all of the cases. One of Them Days had a good debut on Netflix. It brought in 7.67 million views, just ahead of Pulse Season 1, which is Netflix's original medical drama. It brought in 6.53 million views in its first week of availability on the streaming service. At number 6 was the Netflix original movie Promised Hearts, which is an Indonesian film about a woman whose dreams are derailed by an arranged marriage. It brought in 5.53 million views. Alpha, which is a movie from, I think, 2018. If I'm not mistaken, I saw this with my movie pass. It brought in 5.51 million views, just one of those random movies that pops up on the Netflix top 10. When Life Gives You Tangerines stays in the top 10 at 5.41 million views. Devil May Cry Season 1, Netflix's animated adaptation of the video game series, comes in 9th place at 5.34 million views. I believe a Season 2 has already been announced for that show. And at number 10 is The Ladies' Companion Season 1. This is a Spanish romance series set during the 1880s. It came in at just under 5 million views. And here are the most watched weeks so far this year for Netflix movies, regardless of whether it's their release week or not. Back in Action still holds the top 2 spots, but The Life List and its second week performance is actually the third best performance we've seen by a movie on Netflix this year with 29.19 million views. That's ahead of the second week of Ad Vitam and the debut week of The Electric State at 25.22 million views. So we're continuing to get some context on the what I would say is underperformance of The Electric State on Netflix. Looking at the 10 most watched Netflix movies so far this year, Back in Action is easily number 1 at 144.58 million views. Ad Vitam is at number 2. The Electric State does move up to number 3 at 59.21 million views. That moves Counterattack down to number 4, but The Life List is right there at number 5 at 53.58 million. And if that momentum continues, I think we could see it move up to number 3 or number 2. The Secret Life of Pets 2, Kinda Pregnant, La Dolce Villa, and Plankton the Movie all moved down one spot. Despicable Me 4 is now at number 10, and Carry On, which was previously on the top 10, is now off of the top 10. Looking at the most watched programs overall on Netflix this year, Adolescence continues to gain on Squid Game Season 2 in third place. The Electric State moves up to number 5, and The Life List makes its debut at number 8. So The Life List now the 8th most watched program of the year. That moves The Night Agent Season 2 off of this list. And to update the most viewed Netflix series since they began reporting ratings back in 2021, Adolescence now moves onto this list. It's the 8th most watched series on Netflix since June of 2021 at 114.56 million views and room to grow. So it should or could move ahead of Dahmer Monster and Bridgerton Season 2. We'll see if it has the momentum to move ahead of Bridgerton Season 1 at 140 million views. I'm not quite sure, but still a phenomenally successful show, especially considering it was not one of Netflix's more high-budgeted projects or even one of its more promoted projects. Also, looking at the most watched Netflix programs overall since June of 2021, Back in Action moves to number 10. So now the 10th most watched program in the last several years. That moves Leave the World Behind off of that top 10 list. Let's move now to the Nielsen streaming ratings. Now, these are domestic numbers only, not worldwide, like we just saw with Netflix, and they're delayed by a few weeks because that's how long it takes for Nielsen to get us this data. So this covers the week of March 10th through the 16th, and looking at the most streamed movies, Moana 2 debuted that week on Disney Plus and brought in a huge number, 33.25 million hours watched. That's easily number 1 ahead of The Electric State, which also debuted that week at 19.65 million hours watched. Kraven the Hunter debuted on Netflix at 15.1 million hours watched, and Trap made a move over to Netflix. It's available on both Netflix and Max at 10.9 million hours watched. So 4 new movies dominating there with the top 4 spots. Despicable Me 4 is at number 5, Plankton the Movie's at number 6, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is at number 7, Venom the Last Dance is at number 8, the original Moana returns to the top 10 at number 9, and Midnight in the Switchgrass rounds out the top 10. And looking at the top streaming movie debuts on Nielsen this year, Moana 2 easily had the most hours streamed of any movie hitting a streaming service in 2025. It did better by about 7 million hours viewed than Back in Action's debut week back in January. The Electric State has the third best debut as far as hours watched for any movie so far this year at 19.65 million. That moves Despicable Me 4's debut week down to number 4 and Venom the Last Dance down to number 5. So a mix there of original films and theatrical films that are making their streaming debut. And Moana 2 also put up the top weekly performance for any movie this year, regardless of whether it was the debut week or not. It did better than both week 1 and week 2 of Back in Action, as well as the first weeks of The Electric State and Despicable Me 4. And Moana 2 actually had one of the 10 best weekly streaming performances since Nielsen began reporting numbers in 2020. It had the 10th best performance for any movie measured by Nielsen, behind the debut weeks of Don't Look Up, Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F, Red One, and Encanto. The second week of Glass Onion is still the best performance for any movie reported by Nielsen so far at 48.1 million hours watched, followed by the debut of Hocus Pocus 2, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Wonder Woman 1984, and the first week of Glass Onion on Netflix. Looking at the most watched streaming movies of the year so far through March 16th here in the US, Back in Action's at number 1, Despicable Me 4 is in second place. Moana debuts automatically as the third most watched movie on streaming through March 16th. You're Cordially Invited and the original Moana move down one spot each. Venom: The Last Dance is at number 6. Horizon Chapter 1 and Kinda Pregnant are at number 7 and 8. And then two new movies added to the top 10 list, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 at number 9 and The Electric State, which enters the top 10 in its first week. Three movies dropping out: To Catch a Killer, Despicable Me 2, and Trial by Fire. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for March 10th through the 16th, at number 1 was Reacher with another 21.8 million hours watched, followed by Family Guy, Grey's Anatomy, The White Lotus, which just keeps growing. Remember, we're back about a month, so this is towards the second half of their latest season. Bluey is at number 5. Adolescence debuts at number 6 on the chart with 15.1 million hours watched. Remember, this is just a few days of availability on Netflix for this first week, so we'll see if that number grows here in the US, if it performed disproportionately better here than it did worldwide overall. 1923 is at number 7, followed by NCIS, Love is Blind, and Beauty in Black. And Reacher's latest week on the Nielsen charts moves it above The Boys to become the most watched Amazon Prime original program since Nielsen reporting began in 2020. I have a feeling these two shows are going to keep trading off this most watched status until one of them ends. I think The Boys is slated to end before Reacher is. But with the virtue of the latest season being released, Reacher back at number 1, The Boys at number 2. The rest of the top 5 still pretty set. Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power at number 3, Jack Ryan at number 4, and Fallout at number 5. When we look at the best streaming series debuts this year by hours watched, 0 Days still holds the number 1 spot at 30.4 million hours watched in its debut week, followed by American Primeval, Running Point, Missing You, and Adolescence rounding out the top 5 at 15.1 million hours watched. So its debut week not lighting up the charts the same way we've seen other shows, but we'll look at what the numbers do from here. These are the top shows as far as watch time per available episode. So you take the total number of hours watched, divide it by the number of episodes that you could view. And Adolescence leads the way by a healthy margin at 3.78 million hours watched per episode. 1923 comes in second place at 1.16 million hours watched per episode, followed by Running Point at just over a million hours watched. Then we have Reacher and The White Lotus rounding out the top 5. Temptation Island on Netflix comes in sixth place at 773,000 hours watched per episode. Beauty in Black is in 7th place. Severance, which is nearing the end of its season run here on the Nielsen charts, comes in 8th place at 542,000 hours per episode. Then we have The Wheel of Time at number 9, and Invincible, which wrapped up its latest season the week of March 10th through the 16th at just under 400,000 hours per episode. Looking at the most watched original streaming series so far this year, Squid Game is still at number 1. The Night Agent is in 2nd place. Reacher moves up to number 3. It's breached that 100 million hours watched barrier. Severance moves down to number 4. Love is Blind is at number 5. Landman gets bumped down to number 6. And then the top 10 remains the same with 0 Day, American Primeval, Paradise, and Virgin River. And those are all the charts I've got for you this week. Before we go, though, I want to give you a preview of some things that you might be interested in watching both at home and in theaters this upcoming week. First of all, tomorrow on Tuesday is the season finale of Daredevil, Born Again on Disney+. I'll definitely be watching, and maybe I'll bring you my thoughts on the season overall. On Thursday, the 3rd season of The Wheel of Time wraps up on Amazon Prime Video. And then on Friday, we have several movies hitting theaters. Of course, the first is Sinners, the latest from Ryan Coogler, and the reason that you're getting charts a day early this week. I'll be seeing the movie tonight, and I will have my review up sometime tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to this one. Also opening in theaters this weekend are a couple of movies that make me feel like I'm taking crazy pills. The first is Sneaks. Anthony Mackie voices a sneaker who meets other sneakers on a New York adventure. Lawrence Fishburne, Martin Lawrence, and Chris Paul as himself are other voices in the film. And then we have Colorful Stage, the movie, A Miku Who Can't Sing, which is an anime movie featuring a singer who is apparently not real, but is created by a company. And I'm not talking about fictionally, I'm talking about in real world. So this is an actually manufactured pop star. Listen, I did like 5 minutes of research on this, and I still don't know how to properly explain it to you. But apparently there is a worldwide following for this pop star who's actually a robotic voice. Anyway, whatever. The movie comes out this week in theaters. In limited release, you have several options. One of them is The Wedding Banquet. Fire Island director Andrew Ahn returns with Bowen Yang and Han Gi-chan starring as a gay couple. One of them decides to have a fake green card marriage to one of their friends, played by Kelly Marie Tran, only to be forced to have an actual wedding ceremony. Lily Gladstone, Joan Chen, and Oscar winner Yoon Yoo-jung also star in the film. Opening in many theaters is The Legend of Ochi, which is about a young girl who meets a cute young critter and tries to get it home. A24 is releasing this film, and Helena Zengel stars alongside Finn Wolfhard, because he and Pedro Pascal apparently have to be in everything now, Emily Watson, and Willem Dafoe. The Shrouds also opens in limited release. This is the latest from David Cronenberg about a man played by Vincent Cassel who invents a way to communicate with dead loved ones. The Shrouds debuted at last year's Cannes Film Festival. And a couple of recent releases that are hitting streaming this Friday. Companion will be debuting on Max. I highly recommend that movie. Wolfman will be debuting on Peacock. I was a little less thrilled with that film. On Saturday, one of the biggest days of the year for wrestling fans, probably the biggest day, we have WrestleMania 41. It's a two-night affair. Night one will be streaming on Peacock here in the United States and on Netflix and most of the rest of the world. And then on Sunday, WrestleMania 41 continues on Peacock and Netflix as John Cena wrestles for the title. I've heard he's been wrestling pretty well in his return to the WWE. I wouldn't know. I haven't seen him. If you're looking for something, I don't know, let's say more classical, Pride and Prejudice will be having a 20th anniversary screening in theaters on Sunday. This is Joe Wright's version of the classic Jane Austen book, starring Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen. And this Sunday on HBO and Max, the second season of The Rehearsal makes its debut. Nathan Fielder's 2022 series returns for a second season. I've actually heard some good things about this show. I might have to check it out. And that's all I've got for you this week. Be sure to stay tuned right here for Sinners and a lot of other fun stuff that I'm cooking up. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of this channel, believe it or not, and I'm working on a couple of ideas as far as how to celebrate. Thanks to Chubbies for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check out more about them in the description below. But most of all, thank you for watching this episode of Charts with Dan. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.